Hello, and thanks for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. Today is a special broadcast to recognize the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Today, we're going to be honoring the Truth and Reconciliation nationally. But tomorrow is actually the actual day. But today is Sunday, September 29th. So we're doing just a pre-recorded session just to highlight a lot of important information.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Again, this is not live. This is Sunday. We don't normally broadcast on a Sunday
No,
or
no.
release anything on a Sunday. But again, the reason why I wanted to do it today is because I wanted to honor and respect tomorrow for what it actually is. It is an important day tomorrow, the Truth and Reconciliation. I mean, it is an important part of our history. It's a black and dark part of our Canadian history. A lot of kids in residential schools were murdered or abused. I mean, and that's important to realize and to respect and honor that. And so, coming on today, I came on today like we said, because I don't want to hijack what tomorrow represents. And I hope people give you and I the grace today. And I wanted to kind of open up the conversation to talk about truth in a larger sense. And again, doing so, I didn't want to hijack tomorrow, and that's why we're doing it today. So, truth and reconciliation for what it is, it's important. We need to honor and respect it. So this is why we're doing this today, because again, I wanted to open up and have a little bit bigger conversation about what truth actually is and why it's not best reflected in the way it should be in our governments here in BC and across Canada. So I kind of wanted to start there.
Yeah, thank you, Neil, for mentioning all that, because it is so important that we have a respectful dialogue, and of recognizing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. Monday, September 30th is the day of recognizing all the hurt and I mean all the stuff that basically that you've mentioned just on the top of the show here, and we just need the general population to understand that just one day is not going to rectify it. It's a day to reflect on it. But it shows that all the inequalities, everything, all the
Right.
injustices going on across our nation, that needs to be reflected every day
Yeah.
throughout the year.
Yeah.
And as but well, today we're talking about it. Tomorrow is the day to reflect on it,
Yeah.
and to have a broader discussion for
Yeah.
people to come on to the show even after tomorrow, and to talk to us about their stories.
Mhm.
I mean, today we're focusing on on the topics. If you are a person with a disability, that you are Indigenous, and or somebody in your family that is, like, please reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to have you
Yeah,
on,
definitely.
and
Definitely.
we can talk about your story. Your
Yeah.
story needs to be heard, right?
Yeah.
Media, if they're more than happy to do your stories, but if you want your story to be heard on our channel,
Yeah.
you're more than happy to come on, and we'd love to hear from you. And that goes with anybody on any topics related to disability advocacy.
You know,
Uh,
that's another thing, Brent. Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
that's another thing is that it's you've we, I can kind of segue right there because we've had Neil Belanger on
Mhm.
it was just a few months ago with Michael Prince, and they were on to talk about the Canada Disability Benefit, right? Well, for those that don't know, Neil Belanger is the what do they call it? The CEO. I think is that the right term? CEO of BC ANS,
Mhm.
um, the Chief Operating Officer for BC ANS. And what BC ANS, again, for people that don't know, it's an organization that supports people that are Indigenous with disabilities. So it's all of the Indigenous groups uh, with disabilities, and that's what BC ANS advocates for, is for the people with disabilities that are Indigenous. And so a few months ago, we had Neil Belanger on and Michael Prince on, and it was a great episode. I encourage everybody to kind of go back through the archives that we have there for season 2 and look for that episode on on this CDB. In fact, what I'll do at the conclusion of today's show, what I'll do is I'll actually on the exit screen I'll put a link directly to that video to Neil Belanger and Michael Prince's video about the CDB. And again, so Neil Belanger, his organization supports uh, people that are Indigenous that have disabilities, and um, this is where again everything kind of dovetails, right? Because the group of people with disabilities, it's a larger group, right? But as a larger group of people with disabilities, it's important that we learn from each other and advocate together, right? So as somebody with a disability at large, like you and I are disability at large, you can say, we have to look to groups like BC ANS that are kind of more specialized to a cultural group, we can say. And we have to kind of join forces and recognize the work that's being done by BC as important, and kind of like join forces as advocates to say, yeah, this is important. So again, this is kind of where I wanted to dovetail of like uh that.
And they spoke the truth.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
we're talking. I wanted to kind of open up and talk
Yeah.
about truth as a bigger picture. And
Hmm.
yes, we can acknowledge that tomorrow is important. And again, I don't want to hijack the
Yeah.
importance of tomorrow, but you have to realize that there are a lot of, in some ways, a lot of similarities to uh, you know people that are marginalized, like
Mm.
the people that are indigenous have been marginalized, just like people with disabilities. So especially people with disabilities that are indigenous, like in the BCNs,
Hmm.
what BCNs advocates for, you have kind of a double marginalization, if you want to call it that, right? So you have the marginalization of culture, of the indigenous culture, and you have the marginalization of having the disability. So, like I said, it all kind of dovetails. And so this is why I wanted to kind of open up the discussion to kind of talk about the bigger issue of truth.
Hmm.
And you mentioned, I think you made a mention of shirts, like tomorrow people will be wearing the orange shirt. Well, you know, and I'm sure there's going to be David Eby is going to be all decked out in his orange shirt and say, look at me, look at what I'm doing. I'm wearing my orange shirt, But that's one day, and it's just like also the anti-bully day where everybody wears a pink shirt, and it's like, oh, look at me, I'm wearing my pink shirt, But that again, that's one day,
Hmm.
and and again, tomorrow is an important day to recognize for um, people that are Indigenous. It is an important day of truth and reconciliation, but it's important to talk about truth every day, to be honest.
I'm wondering,
And
I'm wondering
yeah,
though, Neil, if the leader for the BC Conservatives is going to John Rustad's going to wear an orange shirt too.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. There's because there was just a recent article regarding Indigenous people regarding I guess his view of just recalling basically an agreement they have. So I'm not sure what's happening there. Again, it's recognizing the underlying issues that are outstanding across our nation and working
Mhm.
together, like working the government's working together to
Mhm.
solve the issues when it comes to the truth, like the truth and the reconciliation, rather than
Yeah.
pointing the government's pointing fingers at each other. It just
Yeah.
drives me batty. Like work together and come to a common ground of the reconciliation. And
Mhm.
it's almost like a race saying, "Well, we'll do better. Elect
Mhm.
us because we're going to do better," or the other party, we're back and forth, right? And
Yeah.
it was quite the headline I saw on it. I'm just going to pull it up here while you're
The article? Do you want to screen share the
yeah.
article now? Okay.
Um, there was yeah, just there was
I'm
something that I
I'm gonna go to the article here now, and we'll screen. I'll go back up to the headline. This is from the National Post. It's an opinion uh, posted to the National Post, and it's I'm not sure if I can pronounce the name correctly, but it's Renu Bakshi, and says, "Color me confused. BC's NDP government woke washed us." 'Cause we all know about woke politics.
mm,
I think that's a kind of a bad situation in society now, and it's polluting our governments as well. But I like I like the fact that this person said, color me confused. BC's gov BC NDP government woke washed us, and
mm,
what that is alluding to, and I'll scroll down a little bit, and it says here in the opinion, there's a mandatory annual disclosure under BC British Columbia's Public Sector Employers Act, known as the Sunshine List, because it requires complete transparency and full accountability for compensation paid to the five highest ranking or highest paid executives with decision-making authority in each public sector organization. Um, and I'm just gonna quickly scan, and then it's on this paragraph. It says, scanning the Sunshine List, you'd be hard pressed to find people of color in positions of power, certainly nowhere near reflective of BC's visible minority population of 30%. This is despite promises from the public sector that they would conduct a review of mid-level to senior level positions and make recommendations to address underrepresentation of specified equity groups. Okay, and we're talking about the BC NDP here. So this is BC politics, BC NDP. This is what they're talking about in core government, known as the BC Public Service. People of color are nowhere to be seen on the executive list. And so and then it goes on. It says power brokers, decision makers, all handpicked by the BC NDP and not one visible minority. Uh, Talk about a dramatic incongruity with the NDP's promised land of equity, diversion, and inclusion, or otherwise known as EDI,
mm,
equity, diversion, or equity, diversity, and inclusion, EDI. More than a philosophy, in their own words, the NDP government's mandate is to ensure the BC public service is reflective of our province and honors its own diverse population. So then this person's opinion goes on. Color me confused, but it appears that the NDP has woke woke washed us. Um, yeah, and so I think I can go on. It basically breaks down some numbers, and I'll put a link to the full article for people that want to read the whole thing. I'm just kind of scanning, so it basically lists a few people and their salaries.
Hmm.
Um, but then it says, "Well, I find the premise of race-based hiring cringeworthy, an opinion shared by many who prefer to exceed on merit
Hmm.
and know how such policies backfire and can cause harm. Many supporters buy the NDP's commitment to EDI.
Oh.
It's a farce." That's what the opinion says in the article here. And then the person says not only is it a farce, but it's tokenism. Uh, and and the person continues and says, "Well, this is nothing new." And here again, Brent, mention we can mention former minister Michelle Stilwell.
Hmm.
She used to be the minister of social development here in BC. She was a she was a Paralympian, and
Mhm.
they just parachuted her in to be this token minister. It's like, wow, like look at us, look at what we're doing, and they parachuted her. She had no political experience, just parachuted her into this very high profile minister job, and she ended up being this kind of anti advocate. You know, it's like, let's see how much I can screw up the lives of people with disabilities by taking away the yearly
Pass.
bus pass.
Yeah, the $45 a year bus pass. Yeah, that
Yeah.
fiasco. Yeah.
So again, I'm just gonna again scan the article quick. I'm not gonna go through the whole article again. If anybody wants to read it, they can. I'll put the link. But it talks about former Premier John Horgan. This is his quote. He says, "Our government has a moral and ethical responsibility to tackle systemic discrimination in all of its forms, and every ministry has a role in this work." And so again, it sounds good, right? It sounds great. But then the opinion continues. It's all lip service. The NDP hasn't even tried. And I think we can stop here. But the whole idea that the whole thing is kind of a fallacy, right? I mean, what, and again, to go back to the Michelle Stillwell example, when she canceled the bus pass, she said uh, she was doing it for equity purposes.
Equity in the system.
She was doing it to equal out the equity in the system. And again, I've mentioned before, the true
Six
definition,
people.
yeah, the true definition of equity is not to is not a subtractive thing. It's not a subtractive thing. Equity is not a subtractive thing. You don't subtract something and say you're creating equity.
Yeah.
Equity is an additive thing, or it's a restorative thing. When you restore something, you're adding something to it. You're not taking something away.
Mhm.
And so for her to say it's equity in the system is complete hogwash. It's BS. You can't use the term equity and say that's equitable. It's not, because you're taking away something that's helping 99.9% of the population, of the disabled population, that bus pass was helping, and you're taking it away and saying it's equity in the system. You can't do that, right?
Well, especially when seniors still have that are eligible for the that same bus pass, they still get it. But people with
Yeah.
disabilities who are not seniors yet, they have to choose between a bus pass or having the cash. Um,
Yeah.
the minister, I remember having a discussion with the minister years ago. I bumped into the minister and I mentioned regarding the bus pass, and I had said, well, why did you do this? And they said, well, the bus pass is always still there if you
Mhm.
opt in. If you opt in, you can actually have that same equivalent of a $45 a year bus pass in the system. But if you don't want to travel, I go, who doesn't need to travel? If you don't want to travel, she said again, you can
Yeah.
have $52 added to your check monthly
Yeah.
and spend it on groceries, a hydro
Yeah.
bill, whatever you may want, a taxi, pay a friend for transportation. Again, you have to choose between
Yeah.
having transportation or having the having the cash or
Mhm.
buying food or whatever, right? Again, yeah, it's not equity in the system. Just to kind of elaborate really quickly on it, because that way we stay focused on for our viewers, is
Mhm.
there was also this special transportation subsidy in rural areas that the government used to give $692 as a lump sum payment for
Yeah.
people who didn't have traditional transportation in their area. Like they would have maybe a dial-a-ride or maybe a handy dart if that was available in their area. Some areas didn't even have that. So
Mhm.
they would pay a family friend, or maybe they would use that lump sum, Neil, and to our listeners, they would pay maybe, like I say, a family friend for transportation, or maybe if they were able to drive, maybe they actually put that toward their insurance, their car insurance
Mhm.
for 1 year. But
Yeah.
instead of government took that away. So they said, well, we'll give everybody $52. For the people in the rural area, they got $52 a month.
Yeah.
So you would have to keep saving that up for a whole year. But how are you
Yeah.
going to pay for insurance as a lump sum if you got to save up for a whole year? You're playing
Yeah.
a catch up game, right?
Yeah.
There was an article though regarding for the indigenous. Just pulling up while you were reading that. That's why people are wondering, well, what was Brent looking down at his screen for? I was pulling it up because when I mentioned the leader for the Conservative Party, um, this is quite alarming, and it's really it unnerves me because it says Rustad wants BC Indigenous rights law repealed. The chief sees that as a 40-year setback. So I'm going to put it on the screen so people can
Oh,
actually see
wow.
what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
And it's all over social media. So on Twitter or X, however you want to call it. So if you're not sure, everyone, pull that up there and you can read for yourself. This was from
Mhm.
Czech News, our island news cast here. CTV News Vancouver has it. All the local media has that same article. So if you're
Yeah.
not sure on the information, just read up on it for yourself, and you can
Yeah.
make the decision that you feel is best for you when it comes to BC
Mhm.
voting day in BC on October the 19th. So yeah, like
Well,
it's very
yeah.
hurting because especially on a national day of truth and reconciliation
Yeah.
coming up tomorrow. I mean, reading that ahead of it, it's
Well,
not.
and again, like the reason why I wanted to do today
Yeah,
is because I mean everybody knows that I'm a pink unicorn guy.
yeah, I got
Like
one right behind me here too.
yeah, I mean that's what and I didn't start talking I only started talking about pink unicorns really when we started the podcast, right? When you started the podcast, I just invented the term pink unicorn.
Mhm.
So I've become this pink unicorn guy that I'm like pointing out all of the policies that are discriminatory in government policy and
Mhm.
saying, well, look, that's a pink unicorn. The PWD clawbacks, that's a pink unicorn. The discrimination that happens with BC housing policies is a pink unicorn. There's so many, right?
Mhm.
And so again, when you talk about truth,
Mhm.
I'm a big truther. When you talk about truth, there's no gray area with truth. There's no, I mean, the indigenous people are onto something. When you talk about truth and reconciliation, you're not talking about well half truths and like maybe this is true and maybe it's not. Like truth is very black and white. Something is either true or it's false, right? There's no gray area, or there shouldn't be any gray area with truth. It's either it's true or it's false. It's true or it's false. There's no gray area with truth, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's just so important to realize, you know.
Indigenous communities across Canada, I mean, they need to have fresh running water. And a lot of communities, they don't have fresh running water. Why not, government? Like from a national level. I mean, everybody needs to have food. I mean, you need
Mhm.
food, and people having to go to food banks, and they're getting turned away. They're getting turned away because there's not enough food on the shelves at food banks. Then you have to wait a month in some cases if you're lucky, there might be some places that you don't have to wait a month. but again, I mean, as a anyone who's indigenous, and as a person with disability, or if you're not an indigenous person, or if you have a disability, I mean, anybody on low income, I mean, nobody should have to choose between paying their rent and paying their bills and buying food. Like all the resources should be there. I mean, we live in a wealthy nation. We should be taking care of our citizens,
Yeah.
and then bringing out the truth of the inequalities is so important because it can be fixed. It can easily be fixed. It's just taking that political will, where the government actually taking Indigenous people to court all the
Yeah.
time. Because well, that's what they want to keep doing. Because and I want people to understand it costs millions of dollars to do that.
Yeah.
Millions,
Yeah.
millions, and you keep doing that every year. Well, you add it up. I think we all learned how to count in what grade one, I think was it. We all start learning our mathematics. Well, you
Yeah.
start adding those figures up. I mean, what does it keep costing to keep taking people to court all the time to
Mhm.
fight? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
cheap, right? I mean, rather than just actually look at the situation and fix the problem, it's
And
not. Well,
and again, like when we talk about truth, words matter too. Words and labels, if we look at like here in BC again, the ministry for social development. It's called BC's Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. It's
yeah,
actually in the title,
yeah,
poverty reduction.
should be poverty elimination.
It should be poverty elimination, but the fact that they actually include it in the title,
Hmm.
I mean, it's lip service though because they're not actually doing anything about it.
Well, no, if
Um,
you go a year and you don't give a rate increase, that's not
yeah,
poverty. That's actually poverty escalation.
the government knows. I mean, for 30 years now. I mean, how long was the rent or shelter at 375? A long time, right?
Since 2007,
Yeah. And
and
and and the government knows that that nobody can rent a place for $500. The government knows this. So how can they, with a straight face, say we are the Ministry of Poverty Reduction? They
Mhm.
can't. Not with a straight face. They can snicker in the back room amongst themselves and say, "Ha ha, poverty reduction. Ha ha, that's funny." They can do that, but they can't with a straight face say we're actually reducing poverty. They're not, because you know they're saying that it's possible to find a place to rent for $500. They're saying it's okay to claw back pensions, which are guaranteed incomes from widows and widowers like myself. They're saying that's okay, and yet they dare trot out the term poverty reduction. Shame on you. You can't say shit like that if you
Mhm.
don't mean it. Like
Here's a little bit of truth when it comes down to memory lane. When I mean, I've had people lately, a lot of people, Neil, and to our listeners, uh, some people have actually watched our podcast, and I thank them very much. And the ones that are watching it, pass on to your friends and your family. Get them to subscribe to our channel, because when I talk about the 375, somebody just actually just this morning had she said, I heard someone, I think that was it, your editor producer said you were known as the 375 guy. I go, yeah, that's right. What is that? What does that mean? Can you tell me? I said, well, yeah, I will talk about that I said briefly on the podcast, but today's a special episode. I said, I'll get into more of that on another podcast episode. But I said, I will, in recognition of the person who had brought that to my attention, I will quickly go down memory lane just so that she knows what I'm talking about. Now, if people are being shocked when they hear it, so 1989, the shelter rate was 275. In 1992, it went to 325. In 1992, there was a big gap between there and 2007. It jumped up to 375, and so from 2007 all the way till 2023, it finally increased from 375 up to $500 for people in market rent. who pay market rent. Okay, you can't find, like Neil just said, you can't rent anywhere in BC or anywhere in Canada, let
Yeah.
alone for that amount. And again, not pointing fingers at any government, because that's they'll say, well, you were in power for 16 years, you were in power for 7 years. For me, I like to look at it as all governments find a solution, work together, and rather than pointing fingers at each other, because it really, like, it doesn't go anywhere, right? Let's find a
Yeah.
solution. Let's actually give people a livable income, and regardless
Yeah.
of you're on low income, now you now need to have a basic standard of living, whatever that may be. I don't have the solution to that, but that
Mhm.
just gives people a little bit of like a background of the memory lane of going down of where the shelter was. And yes, again, 275, 325, 375, and then up to 500. And now people in subsidized housing, they didn't get that increase. So that was in 2023,
Yeah.
because the government felt, while they pay subsidized amount of income to their for their housing, they don't need an increase. Really, cost of living has gone up. Why not? Again, you're pegging people, disabled people in
Right.
subsidized housing versus market housing, pegging
Yeah.
disabled against disabled,
Yeah.
or seniors against seniors, saying seniors who are in subsidized housing versus
Mhm.
seniors paying market rent. Again, you're
Yeah.
pegging the population against each other. Please don't do that. That's like
Yeah.
taking indigenous people who have, say, subsidized housing versus ones who don't. You're doing that divide again. Like, that's got to stop. Okay, like,
Yeah.
got to go forward to have a
And
concrete decision of what to do.
and when we talk about DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion
Yeah.
piece of it, I think that's become a really slippery slope, and I might piss people off saying that, but I think it's become a very slippery slope in that it's turned into a bunch of navel gazing. It's like look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I hope that our podcast and other basically disability advocates never get reduced to that, because it seems like when you get into that navel gazing mode of like, well, like my shit pile is bigger than your shit pile.
Or better.
Yeah, my shit pile is better than your shit pile, or my shit stinks more than yours does. I mean, that's exactly what the government wants us to do.
Yeah.
And
Pig.
and I hope that our podcast never becomes a podcast of navel gazing, because that's a
Yeah.
huge problem with all this DEI stuff, especially when it's not sincere. This whole thing of like the article pointed to is like, the BC NDP likes to pretend that they're all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but when you pervert what equity actually is, when equity doesn't actually mean equity, and when truth doesn't mean truth, and when you can put on a shirt like an orange shirt, the orange shirts are a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but when you can put on a shirt for one day, whether it's an orange shirt or a pink shirt for anti-bully day, when you can put it on for one day and say, look what I'm doing, I'm wearing a shirt, and that's it, then that's all you're doing, and that's tokenism, and that's just a bunch of navel gazing and saying, well, my shit's bigger than your shit. And I think that's so stupid, right? It's so
It
stupid.
really, I know, it really bothers me where, like, whatever government's in power, they're going to say, well, we have your best interest, vote for us. I mean, whoever that may be. And I'm not telling anyone who not to vote for or who to vote for or whatever. You make that decision that's best for you across our country whenever your elections are. But again, like, not dealing with rate increases to help people with disabilities in Canada is a huge no-no, right? Like, and I'm not going to pick on Doug Ford in Ontario, but everyone knows, Doug Ford. I mean, just given like a $50 increase, like, but tied to an inflation, but not increasing the actual income. Like, the rents are so high, you're just giving it to the landlord. So you're really not giving it to the PWD. You can't find anywhere. I think the rates are at 1368 now for the bare minimum now,
Yeah.
and that's in Ontario. In BC, and again, this is not a divide saying comparing disabled against disabled, right? Like, from province to province. I just want people to understand that how the rates are here. In
Yeah.
BC, they're at 1483. Our cost of living is really high, right? All the taxes are high. Everyone knows that. Housing is outrageously high. You can't, I mean,
Yeah.
find anywhere to rent. I had some relatives. We were just talking about this the other day. The average price, I mean, you're looking at over like 22, 23, yeah, $2,600 for for a place. PWD. Well, here's $500. You can take
Yeah.
out of your
That'll cover it.
photo check. Yeah,
That'll cover it.
yeah. And just so
Yeah.
that people understand, when I say shelter, that's going to be abolished. But that'll be another episode. We'll talk about that. But when you get your full check, that shelter portion is actually part of that full check. So landlords are going to look at it and say, well, we don't want you using your support portion because how are you going to pay for that market rent? But hey, go into subsidized housing. Long waiting list, folks. You got to meet all those criteria. Again, that's the truth. The truth is that you can't go a year, skip a year, and then say, look what we did. We raised the rates X amount of times while we formed government. Again, they're comparing apples to oranges, like of saying, well, the other government, they never did it. Again, what is the current government, when whoever that may be, what are you going to do while you are in power?
Yeah.
Change the regulations.
Yeah.
There's a difference between, the truth is, difference between policies and regulations. Regulations are what they can change to work on. The policies is what they put out there. So we can tweak the policies all we want, but the underlying problem is the regulations. Go in there, give me the password. I mean, Neil and I, anybody in the communities across BC or across Canada, we can go and tell you what we want, or you can go and do it because we're telling you about lived experience. The truth is lived experience stories. You're not even listening to your top CEO people from like BCNs, for instance, who went and told the federal Liberal government what we needed.
Yeah.
And what you did was you gave them a gut punch.
Exactly.
You gave them a gut punch.
Exactly.
And so you didn't listen to all the advocacy groups, people with lived experiences.
There was so much time just wasted, right? It just felt like a waste of time, the whole thing.
And then they want the disability community to trust the politicians on their best interests. And all it is, it's just basically like a circus, back and forth. Like, it's not hard. Like, we can go in and change it, tell you what we need, but you're not listening to us. But they say elect us, vote for us.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the truth. And this goes down to, as people who are Indigenous. There are so many people that are Indigenous that are on BC disability assistance, and we need to recognize them as everybody in our country as citizens, right? I mean, they're residents. We are citizens of Canada. People who are Indigenous, they are citizens of Canada. We need to treat them with the dignity and respect. And I mean, and that goes with everybody in our general population too, is just treat everybody with dignity and respect, and have the base standard living. I remember going back many decades ago, and the Canada that I remember then is way different than the Canada that it is now. What went wrong? How are we not providing the basic standards of living for people? I mean, trying to figure out, well, I want to move. And on a personal note, we want to move. We can't afford to move. Why? Because we're not allowed to. The government says, well, we can't afford to give you a rate increase. This year, we didn't get a rate increase, but we got an increase from our landlord. And again, I mean, a question for Mr. The leader for the NDP, that question still stands. My manager I talked to recently still asked me the same question. Did the leader answer your question, Brent? I go, no. I said, why did they not get an increase on their disability this year? We gave you a 3.5% increase. Why did you not get increase? The answer I got was, Brent, we've raised the earnings exemptions. If you can get a job, you might want to look at getting a job. So the job is the solution of end all, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Right.
What I wanted to do, Brent, is, again, we wanted to make this a short podcast. I wanted to keep everything kind of focused. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to end off the podcast today.
On a rant.
No, I just wanted to end the podcast today, and I wanted to leave. I wrote an email to the government, as I often do. And again, this is again, talking about pink unicorns as I often do. And because again, we know if it's a pink unicorn, it's not true, right? I mean, there's the Captain Obvious statement. If it's a pink unicorn, it's not true. And again, this is why I wanted to do this podcast about truth and reconciliation. When you aren't saying the truth, you're saying a lie, really, right? And so anyway, I wrote this email. It was back on August 2020, actually August 30th. So tomorrow it'll be exactly 1 month that I wrote this. And this email is very much reflective of I've probably written maybe at least over 50 emails to the government in the last 11 years regarding the PWD clawback of my survivor's pension, right? So
How many
again,
responses
it's
did you get on those?
like none.
Oh,
You know,
none. Oh,
well, the only in 11 years, the only minister that responded to me ever, and he did this twice, was Shane Simpson. So bless his heart, he's the only minister in 11 years
wow.
who actually responded to me, and he did so twice. Nobody else did in 11 years. Um, and this email that I'm gonna read right now, it's addressed to David Eby, BC Premier, and when he was the Attorney General, he was the Attorney General for almost 6 years. I I I would expressly write to him exclusively because again, part of the job of the Attorney General is to protect the authenticity or whatever word you want to use of the provincial government, right? You want to protect the truth of what the government is supposed to be. Like if the government's policies are founded on pink unicorns and lies, if their policies are founded on pink unicorns and lies, then that's a problem, right? So this goes back now for 11 years. I've been talking about pink unicorns and the importance of truth. And so I'll just end that there and I'll just read this email for what it is, and we'll just end the podcast once I've read the email. So the email goes like this: regarding PWD clawbacks as discriminatory policy. And then I referenced the BC Human Rights Tribunal case number, which I won't say it here, but there's a BC Human Rights Tribunal case number, and that was it's been ongoing for a year now, and I still haven't got a response back from the BC Human Rights Tribunal. It's been a year, and I haven't got a response back. But it says, attention, David Eby, BC Premier, September 19, 2023 is the most recent complaint I filed against the BC's Ministry of Social Development via the BC Human Rights Tribunal. I have yet to receive a response back in almost a full year. Since you are a lawyer in your past life, Mr. Eby, I ask that you please give me definitive proof as to how PWD clawbacks are in any way righteous and truthful or an example of justice well served. If you can clearly prove that my survivor's pension or any pension isn't supposed to function as a well-protected and well-deserved guaranteed income support or supplement, in other words, GIS, the guaranteed income supplement, I will walk away and you win. But if you cannot disprove that my survivor's pension is in fact supposed to be a protected monies and therefore automatically immune from any discriminatory clawback, I ask that you immediately forfeit your own pension as well as all pensions of every other MLA. And then I put a smiley face saying, just kidding. Next next paragraph. For 11 plus years now, the only thing I have ever wanted from my BC government is truth. So here's that big word we're coming back to: truth and reconciliation. So the only thing I've ever wanted from my BC government is truth. And for 11 plus years, every facet of my provincial government, including STPR, or the Social Development Ministry, and BC Human Rights Tribunal, and the BC Office of Human Rights Commissioner Office, have all fallen spectacularly short of the truth. And here comes Captain Obvious. Without truth, it is certifiably impossible to properly judge something like the clawback of my survivor's pension as somehow not discriminatory. Let me repeat that. Without truth, it is certifiably impossible to properly judge something like the clawback of my survivor's pension as somehow not discriminatory. Just as if I were to say that all persons of color are unintelligent and therefore don't deserve the same work salary. The thing that makes that statement both racist and discriminatory is the very simple fact that it isn't true. Truth must be the foundation and baseline for everything. Without truth, there can only be made up pink unicorns. And yes, pink unicorns are discriminatory by default. Captain Obvious strikes again. And then I just say, if you want a more precise opinion, a breakdown of things, you can check out my link, my web page where I on the editorial tab. I mentioned the editorial tab, and anybody can go to my website. It's www.daddybentlegs.com, and like I said, there's an editorial tab where I talk all about the pink unicorns and the PWD clawbacks. And then so the last line in the letter or the email says, "I await your reply and expect nothing less than a well-reasoned and well-defended response. Thank you." And I sign it as Neil Matheson, aka Daddy Bent Legs. And so again, I just wanted to basically end the podcast there. I'm not even going to basically give any more explanation to the email. I think it kind of speaks for itself. But again, this is why I kind of wanted to do this podcast today. And I wanted to respect what tomorrow is. I realized that it does belong to, the indigenous community. And again, this is why we're doing it today and not tomorrow, because I wanted to respect that. I wanted to honor that. But at the same time, I wanted to use what tomorrow is as a jumping off point of what is truth and why does truth matter. Like my last closing statement will be, for example, like if you were accused by your neighbor as killing their cat. Let's say your neighbor had a cat and you were accused of killing the neighbor's cat. So let's say the neighbor's cat was named Schrodinger, as in Schrodinger's cat, right?
Right.
Let's say your neighbor was accusing you of killing the cat, and you would say, well, what proof do you have that I killed your cat?
Right.
And imagine if your neighbor said, well, what does that matter? Why does it matter that I need to offer proof and I need to offer truth? Why can't I just accuse you of murdering my cat? Why does it have to be truthful what I'm saying? You understand?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean,
Proof.
this is what the government does all the time. It's like their policies, if they're not measured on truth. It's like, well, it's like the truth is irrelevant, and the truth should not be irrelevant. Like I said, in our criminal justice system, you don't say, like, if somebody's accused of murder, you don't say, well, give me proof or truth that I did it. And it's like, well, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We'll just accuse you of it, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. But yet our provincial governments do that all the time with marginalized populations. So again, this is the whole reason why I'm doing this podcast today, is to highlight the importance of truth. So when we talk about truth and reconciliation, let it not be just smoke and mirrors and just a nice thing to do for one day. And I've got my orange shirt on, so all is good in the world.
Everything doesn't just stand still on one day. It's there's 365 days in a year, so let's recognize every day of all the inequalities and how to fix things and make things better going forward. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today for our special broadcast. on the recognition of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation for Indigenous people in Canada.
Yeah.
And if you are wanting to come on to the podcast at any time, please reach out to Neil and or myself, and we'll get you scheduled in. We've got lots of openings coming up, and yeah, we'll look forward to having you on, and we'll talk about the lived experience stories. I know some people they are camera shy. We understand that. We've had a guest on recently who just put a picture up and
Yeah,
yeah,
that was
just
that, that was fine.
yeah,
Yeah, that
and
was
that was
fine.
fine too. But if you're
Yeah.
not camera shy and you want to come on, either way, we can work with that and get you
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
And again, this isn't a normal podcast. This is a pre-recorded thing, a short thing. But I will, if you wait till the end of the recording or the episode, I'll put a link. I'll put a link to. Remember, I was talking about Neil Belanger from BC Anns.
Yes.
I'll put a link to that specific video where BC Anns he was talking about the Canada Disability Benefit with Michael Prince.
Very powerful
Yeah,
video, and I
it
really
was a great
look
video. Great
to
video.
tune into that. And
Yeah,
that's the truth right there.
yeah.
The truth
Oh,
is in the
yeah,
mix.
and I should say too. I was going to say this off the top of the episode, and I didn't, but I will say it here. Is the thumbnail that I'm using for today's show is Jack and Nicholson from the A Few Good Men movie, where he's like, "You can't handle the truth," and
Mhm.
again, like, I want to be respectful for what tomorrow is. So I'm not trying to make fun of anything. I just thought, that thumbnail is important because we are talking about truth. So I use that thumbnail as an attention getter thing. But again, it's not to diminish what tomorrow is. But yeah, so I did use that thumbnail. I am going to use that thumbnail of "You Can't Handle the Truth," and when we say that term, it's basically me and Brent and everybody else, all the other disabled advocates are saying to the government, whether it's the provincial government here or the provincial governments across Canada or the federal government, we're saying to those levels of government, we're saying you can't handle the truth.
Mhm.
There are so many pink unicorns,
Oh my
and
gosh,
they
yeah.
and they don't want to
Tons.
hear they don't want to hear the truth, right? They don't want to hear the truth.
Yeah, exactly. And
And
we're
why is
closing.
that? Why
Yeah,
is that?
and all the disability advocates and organizations, we're exposing all the factual information. We're exposing out the truth. I mean, lived experience stories. I mean, you can't get it any watered down than that. I mean, it's because it's the fact. It's the truth right there. When I
Yeah.
say watered down, I mean like the bare base of the truth is right there. Some people
Mhm.
say, well, what do you mean watered down? Well, when I say watered down, I mean just the base facts, like, and
Yeah.
people putting their stories out and talking about what they go through. I mean, I've seen so many stories on social media, people pleading for help. I mean, why are people having to plead for help when the government is there? I mean, we've got all these programs that are there across our country, our beautiful country,
Yeah.
from seniors, pensions, and GIS. And I'm not going to go through ramble all every single one, but ones that people will understand, like ones that stand out. Like there's the GIS and there's the OAS for seniors, child
Yeah.
tax credits, the GST, EI. I mean, you name it. There's
Yeah.
tons of there. All we need is a basic amount.
Yeah.
And what infuriates me, Neil, and our listeners, is just recently the truth got put out there from a lot of organizations, and they're hurting. They're really upset. And PWD advocates. There's Joseph, just for instance, he's very very upset right now too, because the federal government, uh, one of the oppositions, voted down voted down Bill C-223.
Mhm.
And that C-223, even me, I'm very, very upset and angry about that.
Yeah.
There is also, because that is Lee Kazan's bill, that is out there. We
Yeah,
still have Kim Pate's bill.
for the guaranteed livable income, we should
Yeah,
say. Yeah.
we got Kim Pate's bill that's still
Yeah.
sitting in the Senate right now, and that is Bill C-233. I
Mhm.
used to always get those two bills mixed up of who came out with what, and then we had those two ladies actually on our podcast way back when, and I remember they were both came on. I go, no, whose bill was whose?
Yeah. Yeah.
But and it's really hurtful because those two bills were talked about on our channel when we were broadcasting on the well on Twitter.
Twitter
Yeah,
Spaces.
Twitter
Yeah.
Spaces, and that's where those bills really started forming.
Mhm.
They've started forming. We started discussing how the benefit would help people going forward. Again, the federal government didn't take it seriously. They voted down help for people, and that's not just for people with disabilities. That bill, it was going to help every low income person across Canada, including people with disabilities. It's
Mhm.
bad enough. The truth, putting the truth and the facts out there, is that hurting people voting down something that makes sense, right? And now delaying the inevitable with the Canada Disability Benefit. Everywhere we look is like all these delays, vote down, things that are going to help people. $200. I had a relative I had mentioned about the truth regarding that. And you know what was said is that, oh, did the government forget to put another zero at the end of that? I said, no, they didn't forget. They
Yeah.
purposely didn't put a zero at the end of that. And
Yeah.
they purposely, the truth put it out there is that it was supposed to be based on the individual, but no, they want to base it on household income.
Yeah.
And that's up to that $200, $6.66 a day. Now that's a slap in the face. It's a gut punch. Let's get real, government. Let's get real.
It's accidentally on purpose. Like
Yeah,
all of these pink unicorns are accidentally on purpose.
yeah,
You know.
exactly. And it's purposely done to actually hurt people.
Yeah.
I like to state the facts. I like to troubleshoot to get to the bottom of
Mhm.
finding a solution to the problem. That's how
Yeah.
I was brought up, is to find a
Yeah.
solution to the problem and bring people together onto a podcast, bring people together, talk about lived experience stories, talk about how do we, it's not always about finding a resolution, but finding out, stating the facts of this is where it's at.
Yeah.
What do you want to see fixed in your life? We can't always find a solution to fix the problem, but it is discussing and bringing it forward and talking about things and saying, okay, how are these policies, decisions, these regulations, how do they affect your life? What do you want to see done to change these things, right?
Mhm.
And so that's why I always invite politicians or if it's advocacy groups of maybe their expertise is about transportation, whatever it may be, bringing them to us. I
Mhm.
invite them always to come to us because they don't want us to come to them because it's like, oh, I'm busy or whatever. So you come to us. We always invite you to
Yeah.
come on.
I
And truth. It's all about truth.
we don't often I don't often say this, but I will say it for this episode, especially, is that I really encourage everybody after this episode is posted to please share this out. I want to get as many eyeball, especially if you live in BC, because I mean we've kind of made this BC centric because I'm talking about David Eby a lot. So especially because I want David Eby to see this, I want Sheila Malcolmson to see this. So all of our advocates in BC and all the advocacy groups, please share this out and please blast the hell out of it so that David Eby, Sheila Malcolmson, uh, all these people will see it. Because again, the truth matters. The truth is not irrelevant. And it bugs me that the government thinks that the truth is irrelevant. And even uh, things like the BC Human Rights Tribunal, they basically told me that the truth doesn't matter, Neil. The truth doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. The whole idea that the truth of a pension, that a pension should be a protected income, they come back to me and say it's irrelevant because the government's already decided that it's unearned income. So your our argument of that you need to respect the truth is irrelevant. That's basically what they tell me. And I come back and say, well, why is the truth suddenly irrelevant? It shouldn't be. The truth is the truth. Like it's either, like I said, it's either true or it's false, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
why should our policies, why should our governments deliberately be allowed to lie? And why should uh, things like the BC Human Rights Tribunal defend things that are untrue and defend things that are lies, that are blatant lies? Why should the BC Tribunal defend that? Why should the Office of the Commissioner of Human Rights here in BC, why should she defend that? The person that's in there now is I always forget her name, but I mean, why should that the Commissioner of Human Rights BC office defend that too? I mean, it's inexcusable. It's inexcusable that you have these supposedly levers of that are supposed to defend truth, like even going back to the Attorney General, which again, David Eby uh, was the Attorney General for 5 or 6 years. He's supposed to defend what truth is.
Mhm.
And when he doesn't even respond to me as the Attorney General or the Premier and say, well, the truth doesn't matter, Neil. Don't talk to me about truth. Or if the BC Human Rights Tribunal says, "Don't talk to me about truth because the truth doesn't matter." I mean, that's a serious problem, Brent. That's a very serious problem.
It
So
is.
here we are back to the whole thing of square one of tomorrow is the day of truth and reconciliation, and I'm here to tell you that the government doesn't give a shit about truth. The government doesn't care about truth. All governments across Canada, they don't care about truth, and it sucks.
Yeah,
It
here's it,
sucks.
yeah, and here's a little bit about truth is because there's a BC election coming up. PWD in BC, as there's allies all around us, and I'm sure they're probably going to echo everything that we're talking about right now. What I'm going to say right now is I'm sure so many advocates and people with disabilities, with lived experience, Indigenous people with disabilities. I want you to basically, when you go to vote, or if you go to any town hall meetings, okay, or if they knock at your door, I would like it. I'm not demanding to people to say just because we're saying it. I want you to speak up and say how you feel when people come knocking at your door. How do you feel? And somebody in your life, or if you're a person with a disability, or someone in your life, or you're a family member, or someone close by you, even as an ally, what are the politicians, the leaders, going to do effective immediately when they get elected in? Are they going to eradicate poverty in BC?
Yeah.
Immediately raise rates to no less. And Jeff Leggett talks about this all the time. So I'm going to use his line, Jeff. I'm using your line, to no less than the poverty level
Yeah.
in Canada. But this is in BC because we're citizens of Canada. Last time I checked, we're supposed to be citizens. Start treating us with that respect and dignity.
Yeah.
And those are harsh words, respect and dignity, to a
Yeah.
dignified amount, so that nobody in Canada needs to be at below poverty level. I mean, below poverty level.
By a lot, actually,
I
not
mean,
just
a
by
lot.
a few dollars, by a
There
lot.
are there are other provinces in Canada that I saw the chart recently. I can't believe why are any premier in Canada or any territorial government allowing people to live in poverty?
Yeah.
Like, why are we allowing this? So again, I would like to people to repost this out when
Yeah.
it's election time, October 19th. Make this part of your decision making, because right now we have the leader of the NDP, which is
Mhm.
David Eby. We've got the leader of the Conservative Party in BC, which has not been formed in government for over 50 years. They've just now kind of come out of the basically out of the closet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really concerned regarding what their decision making may be for PWD in BC. We also have the Green Party leader, Sonia Furstenau. very strong advocate. She's been advocating
Yeah.
for rate increases for years since they actually formed with the NDP as a coalition back in 2017 and even beforehand. But we know what happened with the coalition, what happened there. Regardless of person's viewpoints on who they want to vote for,
Mhm.
find out where they stand. Who's going to actually immediately make the rates no less than they
Yeah.
are
And
level.
and I know we try to stay impartial
Yeah.
on the podcast.
Yes.
And there's lots of good people on in all parties. Like, for example, Dan Davies, who's been on the show. Dan Davies is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Um, he he was on when I talked about the Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
That was a great episode. Go back to the archives and watch that. It was a great episode. So, I mean, there's good people on all sides, but
Yeah.
I will say, and again, this is my own biased opinion. I will say of all of the leaders, Sonia Furstenau right now uh, would make far and away the best premier of the bunch. She would make by far the best premier. Like she has what it takes. She has the just like you could see with John Horgan. You could tell that he had what it took to be the premier. He had that extra special sauce or whatever you want to say, right? And you can look at Sonia Furstenau and say, here's somebody that has that special sauce, that she's about the only one that I can look at honestly and truthfully and say she has that special sauce to be the premier. And it's too bad that she doesn't have enough numbers to be the premier. But because I mean, she's far and away the best out of all the leaders presented. She would be the best premier, like bar none. Like it would. It's not even close, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
in my in my in my
Besides,
opinion. In my
yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. Besides John Horgan, when John Horgan was in, and
Yeah, John
I
Horgan was great too. John Horgan was
remember
great
having
too. But
so many discussions with John Horgan about advocacy, and he said he would never stop advocating.
yeah,
Um, and that's basically way back in different convention meetings. And I truthfully think, in my honest opinion, he wanted to see what was best for disabled people in BC.
Mhm.
And I know his hands got tied in so many ways because of probably different lobbyist groups, probably had dictated different things, maybe. But again, like regardless on who's in power, like let's just show that yes, hey, whoever gets in, whoever that may be, like work together, like and like this eradicate poverty. let's
yeah,
let's call it poverty elimination. It can
yeah.
be done. Like it's not hard. I was talking to a lady who was 94 years old, and she we were joking. I said, well, who are you going to vote for? She goes, I'm not telling you, Sonny, right? But I can oh, she says, but I can tell you, I've been around the block.
Yeah.
And she says, I was a member of parliament. I'm like, oh, so you need to hold the government officials to account and
Mhm.
find out who is going to eradicate poverty immediately.
Yeah.
I said, okay. I said, I'll put that on a podcast. So today is the day
Yeah.
of the truth. Let's put the truth out.
Yeah.
And this is not just for just people that aren't Indigenous. This is for every person.
Yeah.
This is,
I think again, this is
yeah,
why we wanted to open up the show today to
yeah,
talk about truth in general.
yeah.
And yeah, so that's what
And
we're
this is
doing.
coming from a 94-year-old people,
Yeah.
94-year-old
Yeah.
who's been around the block, and she's disgusted the way that things are going in the
Yeah.
province. I worry, on a personal note, I'm concerned that the leader for the BC Conservatives hasn't talked about people with disabilities in his platform.
Not at all.
John Rustad, you have not mentioned
Yeah.
one word
Yeah.
about BC people with disabilities. We are residents. If we're not
The only party that has is the BC Greens.
yeah, if we're not
Um,
residents in this province, then just say you don't like people with
Yeah.
disabilities. We don't pay, we
Yeah.
won't pay taxes any longer in BC.
Well, let's remember. Again, we will get off the podcast soon. But
Yeah,
let's remember that it was it Craig Keating? Is that the name?
Craig Keating. Yes,
he was
he was the
the
president of the NDP.
he's the president of the BC NDP, and he was on record as saying that the people with disabilities, PWD, are not part of the BC NDP brand.
I remember hearing about that, Neil. And
Yeah,
for listeners, I remember someone telling me that years ago. That I
yeah,
remember hearing that, and I was, what? What do you mean they're not part of
yeah,
the brand? And they're like, apparently he said that they're not part of the brand. And I'm like,
yeah.
wow,
Like he was
we're
on public record to say that.
yeah,
And again, like my last comment, just to go back 7 years,
wow,
remember when it was John Horgan that was vying to be the next premier, and he was successful. I mean, we all know back in 2017. But just before the election, again, everybody and their dog was talking about like we're going to end the clawbacks, we're going to end the clawbacks, we're going to end the PWD clawbacks.
eliminate
Everybody,
poverty.
everybody was saying it, and they didn't do it. So again, this whole show has been about truth.
Yep.
And what did they do? They basically said a lie. So it's like, that whole thing of like, uh, say what you mean and mean what you say, you know?
Yep.
So they said they were going to do it, and they didn't do it. So basically they lied, right?
Mhm.
I mean, let's be blunt and say that, they lied. And they probably knew back when they were saying it that that was a lie, but they said, well, we'll say anything to get elected. It doesn't matter that it's a lie, because truth doesn't matter, right, Brent? Truth
Right,
doesn't
go ahead.
matter. Truth
Yep.
doesn't matter. So we'll just say a lie, and then we'll get elected, and then we'll just say, oh, did we actually say that? We didn't actually say that we'd get rid of it.
Or they'll blame another government because
Yeah,
well the other government's fault, and then it just keeps going, like it's like that status
because
quo.
because the truth doesn't matter. The truth
Yeah,
doesn't matter,
truth
right?
doesn't matter. Yep.
The truth doesn't matter, and that really bothers me. But anyway, we are
Yeah.
going to get off.
Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please subscribe, like, share the
And
channel.
share this one out. Share this one out,
Definitely
please.
share this out.
Blast it out.
If you like the content and really like our content, you may want to consider, or however, I'm not going to word it and putting pressure on anyone. If you want to contribute to our channel, like if you really like it, yeah, you have the email addresses. Reach out to us. But if not,
Buy us a coffee, as they say
yeah,
in the
definitely
biz.
definitely subscribe to our channel. It really helps our channel grow.
Yeah.
Definitely, and watch our episodes. Share this puppy out everywhere.
Share this out everywhere. Just
Everywhere.
blast it out. 'Cause
And
I really
again,
want to get eyes on this. I really want David EB to see this. I want Sheila Malcolm to see this. I want them to respond to this more than anything. Like
I,
I want to hear from them how truth matters, how truth should matter. I want to hear from them. I want to hear from their mouth. Yes, Neil, truth matters to me. Truth, and here's how I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove that truth matters because here's what I'm going to do to prove to you that truth. I want to hear that from somebody,
yeah,
right? I really
yeah,
want to hear that from
I do too, Neil. I want to
yeah,
hear like what leader is going to get in, and you work together. So if it ends up being a minority government, who knows? Like it's a crystal ball. Nobody knows the outcome. But whoever gets into government, and if it's held up as a minority government, whatever it may be, who is going to immediately say, you know what, Neil, Brent, and all your advocates in BC and across Canada, let's show that in BC, okay, because we have election October 19th. Let's show BC that we can lead the country as an example. That this is
yeah,
how we can eliminate poverty. Because if we can show the example, every other province maybe they'll follow. Who knows? If not, have to get a good swift kick in the butt, saying yes, they can do it too. But
yeah,
let's show as an example that yes, we can eliminate poverty. Let's so that people can actually live with dignity and respect, and actually put money back into the economy. A job is not always the solution, everyone. No,
yeah,
I mean, been there, done that. I mean, are you going to tell that to seniors too?
yeah,
Sorry, we're not going to raise your pensions. Go out there and get a job. Get a job. That same rhetoric, and it's the same. It's that copy paste status quo. Copy paste. The liberals used to do that, and I'm not pointing fingers of back and forth before we end the podcast. But the Liberals used to do that. I remember under Christy Clark government, the jobs plan, remember? Yeah, to get a job. Yeah, and it's like same thing as Doug Ford's doing the same thing in Ontario. Like, Doug, really? Like, you guys need to get rid of those scripts. Listen to us, lived experience. Let's make a better province, a better country for
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
inclusive, all inclusive.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, with that being said, vote very strategically in your next BC election.
Yeah.
Find out who is going to eradicate immediately, not after they get in the lip service, saying, yeah, no, we hear you, we got your back, we got more work to do. I've heard those lines many times. No more. Let's cut that.
Yeah.
Let's cut all that out. That's who's going to do it immediately. John Rusted, I'm waiting to hear from you.
Yeah.
Just as an example, because there's nothing in your platform. And David Eby, also, I need to see that in your platform. So on your first note, you've mentioned that yes, you recognize that yes, there needs to be changes in the system. I want a clear and concise answer for each one of you, where you stand for persons with disabilities and also Indigenous persons with disabilities and Indigenous people on low income and seniors. Okay.
Yeah.
We cannot forget about the seniors. And I'm going to be talking more about this on future podcasts going forward, as disabilities do not end at 65. They continue on. It's been brought to my attention many times, so we're going to be really focusing and really hammering that out there. So thank you so much, everyone. I know this has been a longer podcast than we anticipated, as usual.
It was going to be 20 minutes, but oh well.
Yeah, but that's okay. Hope you enjoyed the podcast today.
Yeah.
Take care,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.